talking about amazing customer service. And really the background, every single job or obviously company that I've ever had, I've always had customer-facing relationships. And to be honest, it's something that I think that everyone in every company is always trying to figure out. I don't know if there's a perfect way to be perfect at this, but businesses are definitely getting much better. One example of not being able to be perfect, I think, is the transportation industry. And that's part of my background, which I think one of the hardest jobs in the world is to tell someone that their shipment has hit a bridge. So because it's not possible to always be perfect, it doesn't matter how good you are at moving freight by truck, rail, or ship, eventually something will go wrong. Eventually your truck will get in an accident, your train will get blocked by an avalanche, or your ship will be delayed. I bring this up only to show that eventually we all make mistakes in customer service, but to highlight that during these times when faced with adversity, it's really a great time to demonstrate how dedicated, how committed you are to customer service. And often you actually get more loyal customers during those times of mistakes and errors than times of being perfect. So really the most important part of customer service is simply to try to be great at it. Even the fact that you're here today shows that you think it's important. So I think that that's a great start. And based on that, we're going to jump into it. So the first thing is today, what do you think of customer service? So when you're thinking of past customer service experience that you've had, do you think of the good, the bad, or the ugly? So the good is when you were given an extra pickle at Harvey's. Do you remember that, and do you tell people about that? Or do you tell people about the fly that you found in your salad at a local restaurant? Typically, customers remember these two experiences fairly equally. However, they're much more likely, of course, to talk about the bad or the ugly. The reason being they want to make sure that their friends, their family don't go through the same experience. They want to warn them. So what about the good? Some people do talk about the good, but it has to be exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. This is what we call the customer wow factor. It has to be a shock. It has to be unexpected. The trouble is that some people won't talk about the amazing service that they get because if it's their favorite restaurant or hair salon, they don't want it to get too booked up or too busy and change their experience. So it actually gets even more difficult. The takeaways from this slide, number one, try to be your best not to have any negative experiences for your customers. And number two, think of ways to shock and amaze them because that's the only way you're going to start getting the customer loyalty. But I wanted to start here because it reminds us of what we already know about customer service. We know customers talk about bad customer service. So what to expect in today's webinar. We're going to talk about what is customer service. So what are the specific aspects that we could actually tweak, refine, and improve upon? Why is it critical? The basics, obviously mistakes to avoid, and then the key takeaway. So what is customer service? Really, it depends. Are you a product or a service? So if you're a product, the big thing on being a product is that you actually have something tangible and you actually have your product actually represents you. Versus a service, it can be more of a challenge, especially as you start hiring people. So let's jump into how you actually measure customer service on products versus services. So some of you might have both, so both will be relevant. But starting with products. Basically, these are physical or tangible items like clothing, food, or even an online book. But these are the ways that you can actually improve your customer service. Number one is actually having it available. Do you actually have the product or service that your customer wants on the shelf or in stock? So a really great example of a company that has actually tweaked what they did is Chapters or Indigo. And really, when you go into Chapters, if you don't see the product, the book that you're looking for on the shelf, you can actually go in-store to computers to see what store closest to you has that product. Another way that they overcome and improve customer service in this area is that if you don't actually want to travel to another place, you can actually in-store order it delivered to your house. So having the products available, they were able to come up with a very creative way to make sure that they delivered to that. On-time delivery is another big thing. And the best example, of course, is if you're ordering something online and it has to be there for a certain date as a present. Great example would be Christmas. If it doesn't arrive by Christmas, people are going to be very upset. So how do you do that? How do you make sure that you have on-time delivery so it meets expectations? A great way that Walmart did it is that they actually have a date by if you order online by this day, it's guaranteed to get there by Christmas. So on-time delivery, managing expectations, that was a creative way to do it. Zero defects. That's basically making sure that when customers buy a product from you, that they know that the quality is basically guaranteed, or they're comfortable in the fact that there's a low risk of having a problem with it. So a good example would be buying a new pair of jeans with a hole in it, and the hole isn't for fashion in this instance. How upset would you have to be to change it? Sometimes you'd actually return it, sometimes you'd exchange it, but there's actually a chance that you would never actually want to buy jeans from that store again. Meeting customer specifications. This is another way to deliver customer service. So let's say you ordered a custom suit, and part of your custom suit, you said that you wanted it to have black thread. If it showed up with pink thread, you'd be a little upset. So understanding customer specifications and meeting them is part of customer service. Another one is customer expectations. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but this is often created by you. So you really have to deliver to it. Often it's how you're communicating and what you're doing that creates these expectations. And the final, amazing the customers. This is the extra step. If there's something unexpected like a thank you card, a bonus gift, a loyalty card, or even for the suit example, if you threw in a tie, this is this little extra that gives that little unexpected customer wow factor that will actually get them talking about the good. So if you're not selling a product, and I know in Canada many more of us are actually selling services, what do we actually have to worry about in terms of customer service? The first one is being close to them. This is location. Locations becomes increasingly important for services, of course. It's less likely that someone obviously will go across the town for a salon than down the street. That's why franchises even came into existence, because you love the product or service, and then it's brought to you. Another great example would actually to go to them. So this is part of delivery, and this could be any in-home services that you might be able to provide. So bringing it closer to them is part of customer service. Zero wait time. This is another one. So how often have you gone to Tim Hortons or Starbucks and decided actually not to have coffee until later, or maybe at a different place because the wait was simply too long? This is definitely part of customer service. Tim Hortons ended up changing their entire processes and adopting payment cards and their Tim's card in order to make the transactions faster and make their wait times less. You might have even seen the MasterCard advertising for the PayPass, or where it says how many millions of minutes they've saved for people. It is the wait time of customer service that is so important on this part. Next, consistent delivery. Services are much trickier than products when it comes to this. It's a lot easier when you're a solopreneur, so you own your own company, you make the sales, you do the delivery in terms of the service. So that would be a lawyer, a paralegal, or an accountant just starting up. But the challenge is when you start scaling up. This will become even more challenging. Maybe one way is actually to get your employees to watch this video and realize how important customer service is and all the components of it. But another tip is simply understanding your own process and writing down how you deliver to customers today. What this does is it not only helps to train your employees, but it allows you to actually take a look at it and improve your process to make it even better. Number 4 here is no mistakes in the delivery or unexpected interference. So mistakes do happen, as we talked about. At Tim Hortons, I always order my steep tea. I know everyone has their Tim's order. Mine is steep tea, but because it's steep tea and not coffee, I often get coffee because they might not have heard me or they just assumed that that's what I wanted. But another problem which we have to worry about in customer service is when the customer also makes a mistake. So a great example, again, is with the Tim Hortons. I heard this story on the radio, and it made me laugh, is that a woman was actually going through drive-through, and she heard the speaker or the order taker ahead of her taking the order of the person ahead of her. And she actually gave her order to the garbage can. So when she got to the place to receive her order, they obviously didn't have it because the garbage can didn't take it for her. So she got really, really upset and actually yelled, "I can't believe you got my order wrong again." So this is a classic case of the customer not always being right. But in terms of customer service, I mean, the customer didn't realize that they had given their order to a garbage can. So how do you manage expectations here? One good tip would obviously be try to think about ways to actually make this easier and more understandable, but this is another concern of customer service. Meeting expectations, so we already kind of talked about this. Again, services are tougher as often the customer doesn't know what to expect. Think about your last haircut, explaining that you just want to trim. You didn't know exactly what you wanted to look like until after you got your haircut. Only then can you say, yes, this is what I wanted, or oops. And lastly, part of customer service, again, is trying to amaze your customer in the service. So one of my best examples is a nail salon that I often go to. I get my nails done, and then afterwards, when my nails are drying, they give me a 5-minute massage. This, at least the first time, was completely unexpected and appreciated, and I've often referred this nail salon to my friends and family. So why is it critical? So really, these ones are basic. Good reputation, customer retention, you get the referrals, customer loyalty. It makes your customers feel special. That's huge. And actually having great customer service would even make your employees feel proud and more engaged. And finally, fairly basic, it just simply makes good business. So now that we understand that what customer service is and why it's so important, let's get to things that you can actually tangibly do to improve it. So the very first part of customer service is expectations. So it's all about under-promising and over-delivering. I would say that's actually the key takeaway here, under-promise and over-deliver. And one way to do that is marketing. So making sure that your marketing is explicit about what someone's actually getting. So that's leveling expectations. One of my best examples here is actually the food in Japan. So I was always shocked when I traveled to Japan the first time that every single restaurant has a display window with plastic food. And the plastic food actually shows exactly what your dish is going to look like. So it helps you with expectations. I mean, as a tourist, it was really helpful because I could have ordered something and it would have been a raw, full fish with scales on my plate. But because I could actually go to the window and point at the plastic food, I was fine. But that was a really interesting way to level expectations. Next one is obviously pricing, being clearly identified. Just think, I'm sure everyone has this moment where they've seen a product at a certain amount, they're really excited about the value and they can't believe that product's at that price. They go to the cash register only to find out it was for another product. Of course, we all feel disappointed when this happens. So again, just think about ways that you can actually show information as clearly as possible, have a list of your products and services, explain exactly what to expect, and outline the pricing as clearly as possible as you can. And the nice thing for you is that how do you know if it's clear enough? I mean, you'll hear, and sometimes we make mistakes, and we just have to improve upon it. So next, sales. So this is what you've actually told them, and often the challenge is that salespeople are known, especially if you hired a salesperson, you're always concerned that they may overpromise, and you don't want to be the one under-delivering. Why does this happen? Basically, the main reason, of course, is the salesperson wants to make the sale, but they may not actually understand the operations of the business or even how they can deliver to the promise. My big example here of what was really frustrating is when I bought my first car, I was promised by the salesperson $5,000 off. It ended up actually only being a $3,500 discount. Although I still saved a lot, I was still disappointed because of the expectations. So what to do? Really educate your salespeople, make sure they understand your business and what you're capable of doing. And if you're the person selling yourself, make sure that you actually think through the stages of how to deliver prior to starting to sell. And the last one here for expectations is contracts. Really a great example here of contracts gone wrong are energy contracts. So I know that there's a lot of bad reputations out there for energy companies going around and signing fixed contracts with people door to door. The big thing is that the risk wasn't highlighted. The fine print wasn't highlighted. Any odd points wasn't highlighted. So if you do have any sort of risk in your contracts, in terms of expectations, you have to say that up front. I know sometimes we think that that's not what we should be doing as salespeople, but you'd rather actually get that out of the way up front because you'd way rather lose the customer sale than get the customer, perform the work, and not get paid for it. So getting the expectations up front is critical. So based on expectations, when you meet expectations, this is the start of building trust. And the nice thing is that when you meet expectations time and time again, well, here's my metaphor, as you can see in the picture, is that you continue to build a very good relationship and a long-term relationship with your clients, which is exactly what you want. So after the expectation side of things, the next one is going to be fair. Not being fair is the number one reason why employees leave a company. But being fair makes people respect you. So with your customers, it's going to be the same thing. It is even more important to treat existing customers better or the same than new. I'm sure everyone's familiar with about a decade ago or even the last 5 years, there were a lot of deals for new customers, whereas existing customers got nothing. Very common in telecommunications or cable. And it was actually better for some customers to leave a company and then come back to them to get the deal. And this really is starting to change now, but that isn't fair. And I know that there was a lot of negative backlash about that. So try and treat your customers fairly, but if you're going to treat anyone better, you have to treat your existing customers better. So that's the loyalty side of things. So it's better to have loyalty customer parties than new customer parties. The next one is listen. So there's a lot of great examples in terms of how to listen. So ones that I talked about here are surveys. Starbucks and Winners actively enters you in a contest to actually get your feedback. Another great one here is going to be social media. I know a lot of huge companies, they actually follow their own hashtag on Twitter. And so they can search and see everything that's being said about them through social media. So it's a great way to stay in touch with what people are thinking about you. And finally, if you are getting ideas, if you are getting suggestions, acknowledge and thank them for them. Actually listen to them, so stay as open-minded as you can, and act on some of the ideas. I mean, if you're just bringing all these ideas and you never actually implement any of them, you're going to stop getting them or your customers are going to be upset. Next, over-communicate. So the first one, when something goes wrong, pick up the phone. Often when there's bad news, the easy way out is to email the person or to delay telling them. But in the long run, both are bad choices, as we know. We should be picking up the phone and calling your customers with bad news immediately. Just think about the last time that you had bad news given to you. Would you like an email or a phone call? So try and be empathetic and do what you know they'd want to have. The next one, have a communication schedule. No news is not necessarily good news. Customers won't tell you that they feel left out of the loop until it's too late. This is especially important for professional services. So if you're a paralegal, a consultant, a lawyer, or an accountant, Your customers aren't experts like you are, so they don't actually understand or know what the next part of the service schedule will be. They don't know what to expect. So you do need to communicate this to them. The next one is have a plan to return calls. You need to plan to get back to people within a certain time frame, and this is about expectations again. When I first started, I trained my customers to actually expect a response within 24 hours from me. But they also knew that if it was non-critical, that it might actually be the end of the week. But they always knew that by Friday they would have had a concrete answer from me. This also helped me organize my own time. But their expectations were always met. So even if they didn't get something until Friday at 3 p.m., because I had trained my customers, they actually knew what to expect. And the last point, if you don't know something, still communicate. So this again is related back to transportation. Even when you didn't know what was happening from an accident, a shipment, an issue, you still followed up with your customer and said, listen, I'm still here, I just don't know yet. So no news is actually still something to communicate, just so that they build the trust and know that you're on their side. So we're all human, and how do you actually recover from your mistakes? So mistakes are not necessarily the worst thing that can happen. In fact, there's a lot of good that can come from them. The key is being able to learn from your mistakes and, of course, recover from them. So how? Pretty simple. Number one, apologize. Then be honest about why it happened, or just give them some clarity on that. Make it up to them, so go out of your way to be nice and say sorry with something, some sort of reward. And finally, make sure it doesn't happen again. So one of the best examples of a company that did a great job of handling this was Tylenol. A few years back, you know that they had a massive recall. There was a lot of injuries and even some deaths. It was quite unfortunate. So Tylenol could have actually just paid off through the lawsuits, gone that route, kept all their medication out there. But instead they actually spent millions upon millions and actually recalled everything. It was a huge possibility that their reputation would have been tarnished. But because they made apologies, because they were honest about why everything had happened, because they acted, because they actually compensated everyone for any damage and harm and apologized and brought it back, and because they actually changed their testing and their quality control to make sure it didn't happen again, all of that actually improved their brand image instead of taking away from this. Personally, and probably you're feeling the same way, I actually learn better from my mistakes than when I do something well the first time. So I just recommend when this happens, just make the best of it. So the last piece here is called mass customization. And what is that? Sounds a little strange. Basically, what this one is this is part of customer wow. This is part of the unexpected, is treat all your customers like individuals where and when you can. And my best example of this, and a company that's done a great job, is the whole idea behind Marvel Slab, or the Cold Creamery. And basically what it is you can order any type of ice cream, any type of topping, and then you actually mush them together. And that's what your sundae is going to look like. And you actually have hundreds of thousands, if not a million different options that you can do with only a few types of ingredients here. And it's absolute customization to exactly what the individual wants at the very front line. So if there's ways that you can do mass customization in your product or your service, this is actually extremely, extremely powerful. And this leads us into when you exceed expectations, you actually build loyalty. And in terms of loyalty, all you actually need for an extremely successful business is 1,000 fans. So customer service is your way to start building really your sales force and getting your 1,000 fans. Your top mistakes to avoid. Not doing what you said you would is huge. Under communicating, and then giving too much information. So if you actually give your customers too much information and you make them feel that it's impossible to work with you, that would be the last piece of this. The key takeaway, and I've repeated it a few times now, is under-promise and over-deliver. As a recap, we talked about what customer service is, why it's critical, and some basics. So we talked about going backwards, mass customization, recovering from your mistakes, over-communicating, listening, being fair, and managing expectations. And finally, our key takeaway again was under-promise and over-deliver. So again, this is Carla, so part of Small Business Solver. My contact information is there. And this recording will be posted again on our site for everybody. So I'm going to stop the recording and take